Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, The Answer Company. The division championship Minnesota Twins are looking to go all the way to the World Series in 2024. Bolstered by inspirational shortstop Carlos Correa, a healthy Brian Buxton, and rookie phenom Royce Lewis, plus a pitching staff led by Pablo Lopez and an outstanding bullpen featuring Johan Duran, the Twins are the best bargain in the major leagues, and Target Field is the best venue in baseball. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Spirits was among the first 50 micro-distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at our facility. If you're interested in visiting and learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check our website and plan a visit to tour our facility and taste our spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Access to Democracy. I'm your host, Steve Francisco. It's a real pleasure to welcome back to our studio today an old friend of ours. He's been on the show before. Jason Viana is the Executive Director of the Open Door Food Pantry right here in Eagan. Jason, welcome to Access to Democracy.
Steve, thanks so much for having me back. It's my pleasure.
So for our viewers who may not have seen your previous interview on the show, I believe you joined us last year sometime. We had you on. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and what brought you to Minnesota. You're not from Minnesota originally.
No, sir. I'm from the Deep South. I'm from Alabama. I've been in Minnesota since 2008, so I feel like I'm pretty acclimated and gotten used to the cold. I'm not quite passive-aggressive yet, but I'm working on it. My wife is from Minnesota, and so we've been up here since 2008, and yeah, I consider myself a native now.
And you went to college in Alabama, as I understand it, but you and I first met
at Hamlin University, yes. When I moved up here from Alabama, I jokingly say that when you move to Minnesota, one of the most educated places on earth, from Alabama, with only a bachelor's degree, people aren't sure you can read. So I went to Hamlin, got my master's degree in nonprofit management, where I was fortunate to learn from you about nonprofit law.
When I was teaching at Hamlin University, and you were in the class, and one of our best students, I might add, too. It's interesting to me you're from Alabama, Jason, because I think when I first met you, I said, too, I've never met anybody from Alabama who didn't have a real strong Southern drawl, which you don't seem to have at all. Maybe you've been in Minnesota too long already. So.
I tend to adapt to where I am, so if I'm talking on the phone to my grandma, it comes out pretty
Comes
clear.
out? Yeah. Okay. Well, let's tell our viewers, if you would, briefly, what is the Open Door? Describe what the Open Door is and what the work that you do.
Yeah, the Open Door, we are a hunger relief organization. We're based right here in Eagan. A lot of people refer to us as a food shelf. There are 500 food shelves in the state of Minnesota. They're an essential part of the emergency support system for our community. The Open Door is a little bit different. We're large. We feed, last month, 18,000 people right here in Dakota County. We do that in a variety of ways. We have a come and get it food shelf for folks that have transportation, and we have one of the largest mobile food programs in the state for folks that don't. And we didn't set out to be suburban hunger experts, but in the suburbs, poverty looks a little different, and there's not a lot of infrastructure, so we've built our organization to meet the needs of the community where we are.
Mm-hmm. And it may surprise people to learn that there is poverty in the South Metro. I mean, you see a lot of affluence in our communities, but there still are people who struggle to make ends meet. Give us a sketch, if you would, just briefly, Jason, of what type of client do you see coming in the door for the services you provide at the Open Door?
Well, it's a great question, and I think to your earlier point, a lot of people don't think that there is poverty in the suburbs, and they also have a really different idea of what comes to mind. When people talk about poverty, a lot of people think of grocery carts and cardboard signs, and that is part of the equation.
Or homelessness,
right,
to be sure.
Yeah, people who are unhoused, but the majority of folks that we see at the Open Door have jobs. They have a hard time making ends meet. And we certainly work. We do deliveries to the Dakota County Emergency Homeless Shelter. We do a lot of our mobile work to vulnerable populations, senior citizens. We do a lot of work feeding kids. But by and large, the biggest group of folks that come to us have jobs and just can't make the math work each month.
And they may actually have multiple jobs, right? They may be working at multiple low-wage jobs or minimum wage jobs where with a family of perhaps 2 or 3 children, it's not enough income from those jobs to be able to afford to keep their families adequately fed.
Absolutely. And if folks don't spend a lot of time reading economic data and forecasts, it's easy to just kind of live in the world where you live, and you see what you see. And when you look at data from Dakota County, which is, I think, the second most affluent county in Minnesota, so this is a wonderful community with a lot of resources. There are 80,000 people in Dakota County that don't earn enough money to meet the basic standard of living, which is a pretty high standard in Dakota County. I think the poverty wages are considered about $6 an hour, the national poverty line, which could be a whole other topic for us. But MIT has this really great living wage calculator. They'll calculate any part of the United States. And in Dakota County, single person, $17 an hour. You add one child to that equation and it goes closer to 30. And if you look at the available jobs, not just Dakota County, but metro-wide. So Steve, I'll just put you on the spot with the trivia question. Out of the 5 most in-demand jobs for the next 5 years, how many of those jobs do you think pay enough for a 2-bedroom apartment?
Oh my goodness, I don't really know.
2 out of 5 are projected to pay enough for someone to have a 2-bedroom apartment, which means 3, over half of the in-demand growing jobs in our area aren't living wage jobs. They're home health aid, retail, fast food type work, because that's where the job growth is. And what it just ends up with folks being short at the end of the month.
This is really interesting, significant information, because I think it may conflict with some of the presuppositions that people may have about what does the face of hunger look like in our community? What does poverty look like in our community? Why are people poor? And people coming to the open door who actually hold a job or multiple jobs that they just simply don't make enough. So how much food has the open door distributed in recent years? How much food goes out your door?
So last year, we just finished 2023. We provided over 3 million pounds of food to an average of 15,000 people every month.
And you expect this year it's going to be even higher?
Absolutely. The demand part of hunger relief is a real interesting question. As a lot of your viewers may track, every year they do a survey for all the food shelves in the state. Like, what was demand? How many people did we help? And in 2019, if you recall, we set a record at 3.5 million visits.
That was the year before the pandemic hit.
Yes.
And when the pandemic hit, demand skyrocketed across the board at every food bank or food pantry across the country.
And so we've had a real interesting kind of vocabulary lesson since then, because in 2019, people looked at 3.5 million visits as greatest demand ever, when I think I would rephrase it as the most room ever. During the pandemic, we certainly saw a surge of families in need of support that had never needed it. Just at the open door, we had over 50,000 people come to us during the pandemic that had never been to a food shelf before. And a lot of those folks don't need help anymore. However, what we were able to do, not only at the open door, but in the hunger relief system, is we built capacity. As there were federal funds available and state funds available and individuals giving at a greater level, we made more space. And what we have found is that as the folks from the pandemic have gone back to not needing support, there were a lot of people that needed help that couldn't get it. So this year, I guarantee you we're going to set a record for the number of visits.
And in 2023, you talk about increasing capacity. You actually moved. The open door moved, didn't it? You used to be in the Cedarvale area down near the outlet malls here in Eagan.
Right.
And tell us about your new home and about your new warehouse.
Oh my gosh, it's been remarkable. So we turned 15 in March of this year. So we're still a relatively young organization, and we've grown from a closet in a church at Mount Calvary Lutheran Church in Eagan to one of the largest food shelves in the state of Minnesota. And in that time, we had a collection of spaces that were not connected. We had a 3-bedroom house and a strip mall and then a warehouse in Apple Valley. It was just very hard to run an efficient organization. So last year we were able to move into one new home. We're over near the Vikings, and it has simplified our work tremendously for our volunteers. But if you think about from the time we moved in a year ago, right now, until the end of the year, we created 1,000 new opportunities every month for people to access food. Every single one of them has been taken.
I have to tell our viewers I had the privilege of having breakfast with you last summer, and you kindly offered to give me a tour of the new warehouse and your new home over in the Viking Lakes area. It's a fantastic facility, and the morning I happened to be there, it was last summer, I believe June or July last summer, and it was just a hub of activity. Lots going on, lots of volunteers in, lots of food products being moved and placed on shelves and going out the door. So it really quite a tremendous operation. Jason, tell us a little bit. We hear and read so much in the news these days about the state of our American economy and the impact of inflation. But inflation has particularly severe impacts when we start talking about access to food. Tell us a little bit about that. What do you see happening with inflation as it relates to food?
We've seen tremendous inflation, and I know the great headlines right now are that inflation is down, but it's always important to remember that just because inflation is down doesn't mean it went backwards. So all the gains of the past 2 years are still very present on the shelves when our clients go to shop. And if you look at inflation, it's all about categories, and the cost of food, especially the healthiest food, has gone up double-digit percentages since 2019.
We're talking about produce, meat, eggs particularly made the news. I mean, I was kind of astounded when I saw how much, and my wife and I see that too. We all do when we go to Kowalski's or Byerly's, and you see how much price of food goes up.
And I think that's one of the great normalizing effects of hunger is when you see it regardless of your income. It's like, holy cow, it got a lot more expensive to go to the grocery store. Well, if you were just barely hanging on, that changes your choices, and it also changes the amount of food you have access to. But the second part of inflation is the cost for the organization to spend on food. So at the Open Door, we've been very blessed with generous support from the community, and thankfully so, because last year we spent more than double what we spent the year prior on food. We spent over $150,000 above budget just to keep our shelves stocked and to keep things moving so people had access.
Which begs the question, are donations, financial donations to the Open Door and donations from foundations or other nonprofits, are they helping you keep up so you can meet that demand?
We constantly work to tell our story and invite people to support us, and thankfully we've been able to maintain a pretty steady source of support, so we haven't had to make any changes. But that's something we're always aware of and always working on.
And we're going to talk toward the end of this interview about more ways that people themselves can think of to support the work of the Open Door. Let's talk, if we could, can you describe to our viewers, so what happens when a person first comes to the Open Door seeking food assistance? They make what's called a food appointment. Describe that for us. And you also have something called a drive-through food appointment. How does that work?
Yeah, so we have a couple of different ways to access food through the organization. And if you come to our Eagan Pantry, assuming you have transportation or a way to get there, you come in. There's not a lot of paperwork to it. If you need help, you get help. We have appointments so that people have their time respected and they don't wait in lines. You're greeted, asked a couple basic questions. We'll ask if you'd like more information about housing or about other support options.
So it's not just food assistance, but you're able to actually connect clients with other services that they may need as well.
We provide referrals, absolutely.
A lot of people may not be aware of that.
Right, and it's, if you've never had to struggle with poverty, if you've never been poor, you don't realize that to navigate the systems of support, it can feel like a part-time job. Our focus is food, but we try to connect people to other folks, other things. But when you're there and you make your appointment, then you get your cart, you go shopping, you can be out of there in 15 minutes. You can be out of there in 40 minutes, depending on how picky you are. And then you go about your day, you make your appointment for next time, and your time is managed. But that's for what happens if you come to us. Now, we have a very large mobile program, and so when we go, like today, we are at a senior living building in Eagan. We're at Oakwoods, and there will probably be 70 seniors that will come get support today. It's a little bit different experience there because we seek out the areas of greatest need in the community, and that's usually senior living communities, elementary schools, low-income neighborhoods. We pick those neighborhoods based on data, based on relationship with social workers and public health workers, and then we proactively go to that building. So no one in the building we're at in Eagan today called us. We knew that
you sought them out,
yes,
essentially, and which is really important to understand, because having that ability to be mobile and to be able to go out to them, because you talk about a senior living facility, many of the people may no longer drive. They may not own a car. They may not have a valid driver's license. They have physical infirmities or other issues they deal with. So that's really important.
Oh, it's hugely important. And again, if you can get to us, I don't really care what your life situation is, you get help. But if we're going to leave the building, we're going to go to the most vulnerable. And seniors are one of the most challenging groups to serve. One, because of pride, that not quick to raise their hand and ask for support. Two, but because there are a lot of limitations. So we looked at a lot of ways to help, and the easiest way for us is we'll go into the community room and we set up a food shelf using carts and boxes and coolers in about 15 minutes, and anyone in that building that needs help can get it.
So we're sort of leading into the next topic. You have these two mobile programs. One is called Mobile Pantry Program, Mobile Lunchbox Program. Right. So say a little bit more about how those work.
So the Mobile Pantry is what it sounds like. It's a mobile version of what you get if you come to the food shelf.
Yeah.
And we set it up in a lot of different environments. We have churches, we have senior living communities, and we have low-income neighborhoods where we make fresh and healthy food available. And why that's needed, just kind of go back to your point about the suburbs. You know, people often ask us, like, oh my gosh, you've grown so much in 15 years. Why? And I always point out that in that 15 years, we've not put a single other food shelf out of business. We haven't taken anybody's corner, because especially in the suburbs, because people don't always recognize poverty, there are only 5 organizations in all of Dakota County that provide food support. And if you look at Hennepin as a comparison, you know, there's over 70. There is no infrastructure here. And if you don't have transportation, that's a real barrier. So the mobile program was designed to go to the places in our community where folks need help. So if it's not a senior building, on Wednesdays, we're at an elementary school.
So really, as I'm understanding this, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding this, I think what you're saying is that having this ability to go to where clients are is a huge issue, that if you didn't have that, there'd be a lot of unmet need in the community and a lot more hungry people in our community than you without your ability to go out to where the clients are.
Absolutely. It's about food access, because there's really not a shortage of food. There are resources. It's just, you know, the open door, we're humanity and we're compassion and kindness, but at our core, we're a logistics company.
Right.
We get food from place A to place B, and the more efficiently we can do that, the more people we can help.
Right. And I like this, what you mentioned earlier too, Jason, about for many people it's an issue of pride. I suspect that's not only true of seniors, but also working families who are maybe struggling with this conundrum of, why am I working but I'm still poor and I have to go and ask for help? And there's no shame involved. You try to make your clients feel comfortable. You're there to meet their need, especially where they have children involved, and you want to make sure kids are fed adequately.
Absolutely.
And all of the research and data that I've ever seen says that kids do better in school, better in life, better health outcomes when they have adequate nutrition.
And we all do. I mean, good gosh, I imagine even in your household, you know when someone gets hangry. But that's why we focus a lot of our work. I mean, 44% of the people we provide food for are children. And so whether it's doing an elementary school distribution or a mobile lunchbox program, which you mentioned, the open door, everything we do is groceries, except for mobile lunchbox.
How many meals have you provided to the community through the mobile lunchbox program?
Oh my gosh, in the last 3 years, it's well over 100,000 meals. We're now partnering with 5 school districts in Dakota County. We just added South St. Paul this last year. And our volunteers go to 27 different neighborhoods, 5 days a week, all summer long. And the reason we launched that program was partly with the help of a local church who had started doing it with some kids they knew, and we were able to expand it. Our friends at Second Harvest, much larger organization with a lot more resources, they did a survey a couple years back looking for the greatest area of need in the state. Where are the most missed meals? And you know what they came back with, Steve? the #1 gap in the state of Minnesota were students in the suburbs during the summer.
Wow.
Because there aren't the programs that are available in a more densely populated area.
Because during this time of year, during the regular school year, if you will, they have access to the school lunch program.
Right.
By the way, we should mention too, the Minnesota legislature did something huge
Yes.
in the 2023 session. They did a lot of things. Tell us what the legislature did with respect to the school lunch program.
Yes, Minnesota is one of the handful of states in the country that have made schools free for every student.
Universal
Universal
lunch.
school meals, and I think they just started reporting data that since they've launched it, they've served on average 1 million more meals a week than they did
Right.
without it, which tells you how many folks weren't getting the meals that they needed.
Well, and part of the reason that the legislature and Governor Walz were pushing this through last session was to deal with this issue too of so-called lunch shaming, where kids may have had accounts where the parents owed money to the school for school lunches. They'd often fall into arrears and owe money, and then the kids would be embarrassed or ashamed to, they weren't getting, maybe running into problems with getting their school lunch. And certainly during the summer months when regular school is out of session, that's where you have this gap where students weren't getting adequate nutrition. So
Absolutely, and the universal free school meals don't apply to the summer, so there's still that
so
challenge.
it's just during the school year, but you have this other program that's like a bridge, if you will, that helps them connect to year-round nutritious meals.
Absolutely.
Really significant. Questions have come up recently about the cost of universal school lunch. I know a number of legislators have said, well, wait a minute, why are we paying for everyone to get it when some kids can afford it? But, the bigger issue, let's not miss the forest for the trees. The bigger issue, you have a lot of kids who need it and can't afford it.
Right.
And so that's what universal school lunch was meant to address.
Yep, and so far the early results have been very promising.
Very good. So the Open Doors motto and the title of our program today is A Fresh Approach to Ending Local Hunger. What does that mean, a fresh approach? Say a little bit more about that.
Well, again, we're only 15, and there's no governing body for food shelves, so you get to kind of do it how you want. And we've built the organization on 2 real simple concepts. One's dignity. It shouldn't be hard to get help if you need it, and that in and of itself is a fresh approach. But the second part is health, because there's a huge relationship between your health and what you eat. And I know you know this, and I know this. And for a long time in history, food shelves were primarily canned goods. And we made a commitment from the day we started that 70% of the food that we offer to our clients will be fresh, healthy, and perishable. And to this day, of the 3 million pounds we shared last year, over 2 million of those pounds, meat, fruit, vegetable, dairy, eggs, the stuff that you need to make yourself whole. Because if you go back to that inflation standpoint, you go back to that grocery store, Steve, if you've only got so much money and you've got a lot of mouths in your house, you make very different decisions.
That's right.
Honeycrisp apples, $3.99 a pound.
That's not going to be on your shopping list.
Shells and cheese, it's $1.
You're going to be having a diet high in carbohydrates, high in salt and preservatives, high in sugar, and we already have an epidemic in our country, unfortunately, of diabetes and obesity.
And if you look deeper at those numbers, the relationship between your income and those risk factors, it is a very positive correlation.
This is really an important point because in the end, we all pay for this in higher health insurance premiums, higher costs for insurance when populations are unhealthy and have to have medical interventions to deal with those types of issues. So basic nutrition and healthy nutrition, this fresh approach is really at the core of the whole approach, isn't it?
It is, and because I have conversations with folks from all sides of perspectives and viewpoints, and if you take the kindness and you take the charity and compassion out of it, it benefits every single part of our society to have a healthy, well-fed, well-nourished community.
Absolutely.
Students, employees, friends, etc.
We are getting down to about our last 2.5 minutes, but I can't let you go today without highlighting a couple of big events that you have coming up. Tell us about your partnership with Cub Foods. You have an event coming up called Super Bagging.
Yes.
What is this?
Well, this was it's an event put on actually by one of our partners, Scott Swinson, our Eagan resident, works with Drake Bank, and if you ever seen high school athletes bagging groceries for tips, he had the idea that on Super Bowl weekend, we should get all the community together and do it on both days to support hunger relief. And this will be year 11 that we've done it. We'll be at 7 Cub stores in Eagan, Apple Valley, and Lakeville. And we need 400 volunteers all weekend to bag groceries for
And
tips.
so our viewers, if they are so inclined to come out and help fight hunger in the community, this is a tremendous opportunity. February 10th and 11th, Super Bowl weekend, when super bagging at Cub Foods.
Absolutely, and it's great for youth events, for confirmation groups. If you can't volunteer, just shop at Cub that weekend.
Right?
Drop a 20 in the till, and we'll say thank you very much.
That's tremendous. Last minute and a half, I want to ask you, there are numerous ways that people can donate and provide help to the Open Door in your important, vital mission of helping feed our community. They can donate food, money, plan giving, volunteering. Say real quickly a little bit about each of those.
Well, our work is dependent on people's kindness and generosity. And whether it's the Open Door or Second Harvest or the food shelf that's closest to your viewers, there is a role for them to play. Whether it's giving their time, their money, or their food, they can absolutely make a huge impact.
Plan giving, people can put a provision in their will, in their trust or their estate, making a donation to the Open Door.
Absolutely.
Volunteering, again, as either individuals or groups.
Right.
It sounds like with your big new warehouse, you need lots of people to keep the food moving there.
We have 60 to 80 people volunteer every single day to make our organization work.
That's tremendous.
There's room for you.
Wow. Jason Viana, Executive Director of the Open Door Food Pantry right here in Eagan, thank you so much for the work that you, your staff, your dedicated volunteers do, and the sponsors and donators who support your work. Thank you so much for what you do in our community. And thank you for being our guest today again on Access to Democracy.
Thanks for having me, Steve, and thanks for telling our story.